Previously on Podcast Without Pretense.
I'm not here right now.
I've decided that I'm going to take this whole bottle of one-a-day pills, and then I don't have to take them for the rest of the year.
I'm telling you, if he doesn't show up, like, it could easily be the Ayaz and Eric show. It would be great.
Boy.
Good times. Good times.
That last episode you guys did without me?
Yeah.
I don't.
Our highest rated, you mean?
Haven't listened to it. Is it the highest rated?
We got so many freaking emails from people saying we missed it's the Jonathan show bumper.
It's weird. It's weird because we don't have an email address to give out. We just tell people that
if they want to,
we just say that if they want to contact us, they have to go outside, drop to their knees, raise their hands to the heavens, and yell "Con!"
Well, that's what happens. Hey, I'm Ayaz Akhtar.
I'm Jonathan Strickland.
And I'm Eric Sandine.
And together, we have the luck of the Irish.
That we do, because Jonathan stole it from Ireland. So
that's right. I got back with it.
Yeah, so we've got, Jonathan's been missing for the past 6 to 8 weeks. He's been on vacation, he claims. If you never watched this show, Jonathan, what the hell is the show about?
It's usually about an hour long. And it involves the three of us talking about whatever kind of bullshit we want to talk about. And we also tend to pick a movie, usually a bad movie, on Netflix or some comparable service, and try to watch as much of it as possible without any sort of distractions, just to see how long we can test our attention spans. Once we do give in to the urge to have distractions come into play, we can then choose to either continue watching the film, just making a note of how far we got, or we can give up and do something constructive and useful, perhaps help a fellow human being who's in need. It's not likely to happen, but it's a possibility.
So many episodes we focus on us quitting the movie and saving humanity because of the Podcast Without Pretense signal that pops up. And we're like, yes, we will save them by sending them good thoughts, good vibes.
If only we had done that with Rock and Roll Frankenstein. I mean, seriously. Ugh.
On record is the worst movie we've ever watched.
Yeah, and that's saying something. There have been some real stinkers. And this time, because I was going on vacation to Ireland, I thought it would be clever to pick the film Leprechaun, the Jennifer Aniston vehicle that propelled her to amazing success.
Absolute
and of course,
stardom.
Warwick Davis was also in that as the title character, Leprechaun.
Propelling him to success in the past as R2-D2 and in the future as R2-D2.
Wait, what? No, Warwick Davis wasn't R2-D2. What the fuck are you talking about, dude? Okay, you got to turn in your geek cred card, buddy.
No,
I think he did play. I think he might have been in Wicket. He might have been in Wicket, the Ewok, but he certainly wasn't in R2-D2.
He's in R2-D2.
No,
that's what I've decided.
At any rate,
I'm being what's the word? I'm not racist. I'm being heightist.
Yeah, gosh, what the heck happened? I'm suddenly going dark. There we go. At any rate, I was going to say, like, Eric and I both took notes on this. Ayaz, did you get a chance to watch it? You said there might be a chance that you would not be able to see it.
I got through a staggering 14 minutes, and then more important moving stuff came up.
That's fair. Even if more important moving stuff had not come up, that's still fair.
It wasn't bad, the 14 minutes I saw. I will say that. So I'm assuming it just gets better after the 14 minutes.
Eric, how far did you get before you stopped?
I got notes. 28 minutes in.
Okay. This is how far I got before I...
Now that's before I opened a screen. I did finish it.
Okay. Well, I finished it, but this is how far I got before I opened up a screen. 1 minute, 18 seconds. Which, if you're curious, is that's 1 second before Warwick Davis's name appears on screen. But to be fair, to explain what happened, just at that moment, I had just started the movie. I was ready to really test myself. But a minute, 18 seconds in, I got a phone call from my mother. Now, my sister is pregnant and her due date is today. So I thought perhaps it was a message about my sister going into labor. So I decided to pause the movie and take the phone call. It turned out it was just my mom wondering why I called her yesterday, which was in order for me to ascertain the status of my sister. So, because my mom was taking my sister to a doctor's appointment, and I thought perhaps I would get an update without bugging my sister, who understandably has a lot going on right now. So anyway, it ended up being I didn't have to have taken that call, although it's always rude for you not to answer a phone call from your mother. But that is why I only got a minute 18 in. I think I probably would have made it about 16 minutes, because that's when I went back to watch it, I thought, well, I'll just see how far I can go without another distraction. And at about the 16-minute mark, I thought, this just isn't worth it. I'm going to open up another screen, at least so I can take notes. And that's what I did. But Eric, I understand you took notes too.
I did. And the best part about these notes is that they're from 4 weeks ago, I think. So there's a few that I'm not entirely sure what they're referencing.
Oh,
so
good. Well,
my first note
you can
is
at least
the painter didn't even.
We can all guess.
What's up?
So we can all guess.
No,
what
probably.
Yeah.
Right. The painter didn't look like he put primer down before he blew himself.
Oh yeah,
that one.
I didn't see that part.
Yeah, the painter ends up getting blue paint spilled all over him. There are 3 handymen in Leprechaun.
Mm-hmm.
One incredibly handsome dude who is the Prince Charming type character. Then you have the precocious child, Alex, who you desperately want to see skinned alive by the leprechaun. And then you have Ozzy, the not quite right in the head, slow, big, dumb guy. He's the one who gets blue all over himself.
Right.
You know, I will say, by the way, before we get to the rest of Eric's notes, that I recognize the actors. I know I don't recognize Warwick Davis because I don't have Star Wars geek cred, because I will never get Star Wars geek cred because I don't care about Star Wars. Yeah, I said it. The little kid was from Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. He's the one who falls off the roof. I'm right about that. I know that. And the fat guy, Ozzy, was from Teen Wolf. He was Chubbs. And that's my needless trivia. Eric?
Ozzy was also known for playing Jabba the Hutt in Return of the Jedi.
Fantastic.
That's right. That's exactly true. I can back that up. Jonathan Star Wars idiot.
So go on, Eric. I'm sorry.
I have my next note is, how long does it take for a 4-leaf clover to decompose? I mean, 10 years seems like a long time.
Yeah. All right.
Because apparently they lock. Go for it.
Oh no. Yeah. Well, because I just watched it. Yeah. In the lore of the Leprechaun movies, but not necessarily in actual Irish folklore, the 4-leaf clover is deadly to leprechauns, although they don't actually explain how it's deadly, like what you have to do in order for it to actually take effect on a leprechaun. But somehow it negates their powers. And so the character we're introduced to at the very beginning of the movie ends up capturing this leprechaun and putting him in a crate, and puts the 4-leaf clover on top of the crate, thereby negating the leprechaun's ability to move around, although some of his other powers appear to be perfectly capable of working. And yeah, that 4-leaf clover sits on top of the crate, and then in the next scene we see a subtitle that says 10 years later.
Yeah. Other than that, my notes are they get really blurry after then because I wasn't paying attention. But I remember this scene, which is, I believe, after the leprechaun's already attacking them. The Nathan, who is the house hand, something like that. I don't know. Yeah. My note underneath this note says douche equals Nathan. So I'm not sure who that is.
He's the handsome handyman.
Right? That's what I thought. Okay. So there's at one point where he hands Jennifer Aniston a broom and says, "You know how to work one of these, right?" And that was just wrong. And I'm pretty sure that's why the note underneath that says douche equals Nathan.
Everyone in this movie is pretty much an asshole in
It's
some
true.
regard. With possible exception of Jennifer Aniston's character's dad, who doesn't appear to be an asshole so much as he's your typical dad. Dad, I didn't want to go to North Dakota. But what happened to him, by the way? I must have looked away from the movie. Did the dad get killed? I saw he got bitten by the leprechaun at one point. Does he just exit the movie at that? He got bit on the hand because he reaches in thinking it's a cat.
I honestly do not remember. I have no clue.
I don't think the dad dies. I think the dad is bitten on the hand by the leprechaun. The leprechaun's making these cat noises and is inside a hollowed out log in a tree. And so the dad, doing what is sane, of course, sticks his arm where he can't see, Flash Gordon style, through this hollowed out log to try and grab hold of a cat that he cannot see at all, and gets bitten on the hand. And I think he must end up going to the hospital and just is not in the rest of the movie. I don't think the leprechaun kills him. If he does, it was in a scene that I missed.
Well, the dad's also played by the guy who played Zach Morris's dad in Saved by the Bell. That was this entire movie for me from what I saw in the 14 minutes. I'm like, hey, I know that guy. I know this guy.
And Zach Morris's cell phone also appears as Jennifer Aniston's cell phone.
Zach Morris also famously played Anakin Skywalker. Yeah, as I said.
That's right. No, actually, he only played Anakin Skywalker in the Return of the Jedi, where they replaced the old actor with Zach Morris. Not the actor, the character Zach Morris, who freezes time and then directly addresses the audience at the end of Return of the Jedi, which we have all determined was Lucas's way of giving us a sincere and earnest "fuck you for liking my movies" message.
Eric?
Yes, back to you, Eric.
My last note just says fell into water in the well, then gasoline ? I believe that's how they attempted to kill him.
Where the well explodes. Okay, well, I took more notes, and I had just finished watching this probably about 20 minutes before we went live. So, and it took me several attempts. Like, I kept pausing it because I was just like, this movie is terrible.
That's the thing. I watched it twice.
And it's a terrible movie. I mean, it's a horror comedy that is neither scary nor funny. The attempts at humor are all terrible. They're lame. It's mostly related to slapstick, but it's really just lame slapstick. And then occasionally there's some sort of verbal attempt at humor, either a pun of some sort, but not as many as you would expect. You would actually think that the Leprechaun character would have kind of more of a later Freddy Krueger approach, the whole let's make a pun at the end of every kill, but he doesn't really do that very much. He's really just kind of obnoxious. So here are some of my notes. First, I said that the lore is completely bizarre. I don't know of any legends in which a four-leaf clover is the bane of leprechauns. There are some legends that say that four-leaf clovers could protect against evil spirits, and leprechauns in Irish folklore are considered to be at least mischievous, if not often malevolent fairies. But then again, almost all fairies in Irish folklore are malevolent in some regard. But I don't know of any specific legends that say four-leaf clovers are dangerous to leprechauns. The symbol of Ireland is the shamrock, but that's not a four-leaf clover. That's a three-leaf shamrock. It's the symbol of Ireland because when St. Patrick came over, he used at least the way the legend goes, he used the shamrock to explain Christianity with the concept of the Trinity, where God is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, while being a single entity at the same time. Thus, you have the shamrock with the three leaves, but it's all part of one plant. So two different things. So the four-leaf clover does not really factor in heavily in Irish folklore. I was just in Ireland, by the way. So Not that I'm an expert, but I at least knew that part.
You've got to add this entire. Somebody's got to write down everything Jonathan just said and add it to IMDb, because that was far too well stated for a movie called Leprechaun about a leprechaun who's coming after some guy for some gold.
Yeah,
That
right.
far too well
Right. Yeah, so the opening shot is of the leprechaun counting gold and saying that anyone who steals it won't live through the night. And we see a pretty good, clear view of the leprechaun. I mean, it's not lit in such a way that you see all the contours of his ghoulish face yet, but you get a good view of it, especially his hands. So the reveal is at the very top of the movie, before you've seen any other characters. Then we see a woman who's waiting for her husband to get home. He's apparently stolen a pot of gold from this leprechaun way back in Ireland. The couple are originally from Ireland. They've moved to the United States
and shipped it via post back from Ireland.
Yeah, the whole thing is that he apparently went to Ireland to attend his mother's funeral, and that then shipped what the wife assumed was his mother's ashes in an urn back to his home in America in North Dakota. But in fact, it was not an urn filled with his mother's ashes, but an urn filled with coins, because he reveals that while in Ireland, he had captured a leprechaun and forced him to tell him where he hid his pot of gold. By the way, we don't see any of this, because that would be far too interesting to actually see how he managed to capture and then get that pot of gold from the leprechaun in the first place. What we do see is that the leprechaun has apparently, this entire time, been hiding in the man's luggage. And he just waits for the wife to open up the luggage, and then he jumps out, kills the wife, despite the fact that the wife did not have any part in stealing the gold, and then terrorizes the man who has since hidden the pot of gold, or a pouch of gold coins, and demands that the guy tell him where the coins are. This is where those powers get really weird, because the guy has a 4-leaf clover, which in this movie is kind of like holding up a crucifix to a vampire. It has the same effect on a leprechaun. So he holds the 4-leaf clover in one hand and a revolver in the other hand, tries to shoot the leprechaun a few times, which doesn't have much of an effect. Gets the leprechaun in the crate, hammers the crate shut, leaves the 4-leaf clover on top of the crate. But then the leprechaun apparently is able to give the guy a stroke. Are you guys still there?
I'm here.
I'm hearing a Skype noise. Oh,
Ayaz,
okay.
you're getting a call. Oh.
Well, I will continue while Ayaz deals with this. So at any rate, getting back into it, the leprechaun apparently is able to give the man a stroke, even though he's downstairs in a basement in a crate with a 4-leaf clover on top of him. The man has a stroke and is unable to set fire to the crate, which apparently would have killed the leprechaun, or at least that's what the assumption is. And then we skip ahead 10 years, not knowing the fate of the man yet. 10 years later, we've got a father and his daughter moving into this house in North Dakota. The daughter's played by Jennifer Aniston, and her character is kind of a spoiled bitch character. She wanted to spend the time in Los Angeles. She mistakes North Dakota for New Mexico. I don't know if you remember that, Eric.
Oh, no, I caught that one. I remember that happening.
It's a lovely little moment. I mean, the two are so easily confused. Anyway, they pretty much try and establish as hard as they can that she's a shallow, materialistic person multiple times. And they also later establish that she's a vegetarian, but not just a vegetarian, a preachy vegetarian. So that makes her and a hypocritical preachy vegetarian, because she wears leather shoes. So therefore, making her the nastiest kind of person. I don't know why we're supposed to care whether or not she lives or dies. Also, jumping back a bit, one of the things I thought was weird is when the leprechaun kills the man's wife at the very beginning, the leprechaun's in silhouette, which makes no sense to me, because they've already revealed the leprechaun in the very opening of the movie. It feels almost like they're trying to hold back on showing the leprechaun after that kill, but they've already shown what the leprechaun looks like. That could just be from editing, but it was a weird choice. So the girl and her dad move into this house. The girl's complaining the whole time. There are tarantulas in this house, which is odd for North Dakota.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. I don't really think that tarantulas range as far north as North Dakota. And then I say that Jennifer Aniston's character quickly switches from wanting to leave to wanting to stay in the house because Nathan the douchebag essentially calls her chicken for not wanting to be in a house that has bugs in it. And so to prove him wrong, she'll stay. So the characters have very deep motivations is what I'm trying to get at. It all rings very true. I then mentioned that the attempts at jokes are really lame, but I mentioned that already. I said it's really unsophisticated humor. And it's weird because the humor feels like it's aimed at kids, but the violence certainly isn't, because there's quite a bit of gore in this movie. But it's weird because all the jokes feel like they were meant for, young kids, not just 12 or 13-year-olds who I would assume are the real market for this kind of movie. But younger.
Wasn't it R? I mean...
Oh, I'm sure, but this felt like the kind of movie that finds its audience on Cinemax.
Yeah,
fair enough. It felt like the kind of movie you would watch on pay cable when your parents are in bed or something and you're a little kid. But the gore is certainly more graphic than what you would imagine based upon the humor, because the humor feels like it was really aimed at 6 or 7-year-olds. The magic rainbow that appears is one of the worst visual effects ever. It looks like the reading rainbow appears in the sky. I said that the little kid in this movie is obnoxious as hell, and I really hope he dies. I doubt he will, but I can still hope. He does not. He lives. I wrote down the quote, "We can get you an operation to make you smart and fix your brain." That's what the kid says to the slow handyman. And then while Jennifer Aniston's character is painting the house, the douchebag says, "You're a regular Picasso," which also seems like it's a diss if you're talking about painting a house. I said there's an awful pop country song called "Won't You Be My Four-Leaf Clover," and there's 2 different versions of it, and they're both played in this movie. There's one that's kind of a peppy pop version that's played as the daughter and father are driving to the house. And there's a slower version that plays as the daughter and douchebag are in a diner together. And both versions are terrible. It's like the worst of all like pop country stuff. And then I said the Leprechaun drives around in a miniature car he steals from a pawn shop. But he also seems to have some sort of ability to teleport, so I don't know why he needed a car. And then I said, what exactly are the rules for killing mortals? Because some of his victims had nothing to do with stealing his gold. So he kills like some cops that have no connection to stealing the gold at all. And there's no motivation for it other than, I guess, leprechauns are just homicidal maniacs. Also, I said the ADR in this movie is terrible. There's one cop who only speaks with ADR. You can tell that they dubbed everything over afterward, and it's not good. But in general, all the ADR work is bad. And then I said in some shots, like in the bear trap scene in particular, they use a noticeable double for the Leprechaun character, who is at least 1.5 feet taller than Warwick Davis. So that's a little distracting. Then I said, I get the feeling that Mark Jones, who was the screenwriter and director, did absolutely no research on leprechauns, which is a shame because there's actually quite a bit of lore that could have made an interesting horror movie, but this was just a farce and not a funny one. Meanwhile, I guess we're trying to get Aya's back.
I think I'm back.
Well, you just missed the end of my summary, but that's okay. You didn't
thrilling really conclusion.
Okay. So not only have I only watched 14 minutes of this movie, but when I try to listen to the way it ends, I get booted off because I blow a circuit in this house. This house was built in 2011. And what makes me laugh even more was just yesterday, I had said, hey, all I had to do was change one thing in my office, and I haven't blown a fuse since.
Wah, wah.
Yeah,
Sounds
there we go.
right.
That's karmic.
On the bright side, your video looks better.
Probably helped because this
does actually.
this Mac Pro from like the Stone Age is not going to make it. How does the movie end?
All right. Well, the movie ends with them finding out from the stroke victim, who has still survived, though not for much longer, that the way to kill a leprechaun is to use a 4-leaf clover, which again makes no sense. And then they all run out into clover fields trying to find a 4-leaf clover until Ozzy, the idiot, tells Jennifer Aniston's character that all she has to do is really believe. And she's like, fine, I believe. And then suddenly she finds a 4-leaf clover. Because, sincerity and belief apparently aren't necessary. You don't need to be sincere. So anyway, she finds a 4-leaf clover.
On that part? Or is that actually the truth? Are you messing with me on that? Like she
just
says,
no, that's completely true. He is not screwing with you.
She's searching a patch of clover. They all are. And she's like, we'll never find one. And Ozzy's like, look, you can find one. You just gotta believe. And it's kind of that delivery. And she says, fine, I believe. And then boop, pops one up. It's ridiculous. Alex ends up, the kid, the super obnoxious kid, ends up getting hold of the 4-leaf clover. The leprechaun is attacking Ozzy because the leprechaun, all the gold has been returned to the leprechaun, save 1 coin. So the leprechaun has retrieved 99 of his 100 coins, but the 100th coin is in Ozzy's stomach because he had swallowed it for safekeeping. So the leprechaun is starting to attack Ozzy with the intent of cutting him open and getting his coin back. And Alex, who has an on-again, off-again supportive, passive-aggressive relationship with Ozzy, decides to try and save him. So he grabs the 4-leaf clover, shoves it in a wad of chewing gum, uses a slingshot, and fires the gum filled with 4-leaf clover into the mouth of the leprechaun, thus removing all his power. They then shoot him, dump him in a well, and blow up the well, apparently killing the leprechaun, who then, of course, has the last word, which is he wants his gold because he's not really dead, because that would make sense. I mean, this whole movie, it's just terrible. It's not worth watching. I cannot comprehend how it got so many sequels, considering that it's not funny, it's not scary. The gore effects are okay. The makeup effects are okay, but it's nowhere near as interesting as actual Irish folklore is. I actually think you could probably make a really interesting, even a horror comedy approach, a really interesting movie that is more true to Irish folklore, because the fairies in Irish folklore are mean sons of bitches. So you could actually do a really decent movie that way, but this is not it. This is just, it's just sloppy and boring and terrible.
Yeah,
and
it was horrible. Yeah. Not the worst thing we've ever watched. Not that offensive. Just boring and not worth watching.
From a budget to quality standpoint, it's one of the worst ones. Like some of the really bad movies we've seen, part of the reason why they're so bad is because they had shitty budgets. It had to be higher than most of the fucking stuff we watched. Think of some of the movies we've watched, Eric. I'm not saying that it was like Avatar level of expense. I mean, G.I. Joe Retaliation is probably the worst movie we've watched considering its budget, right?
Yeah.
I think G.I. Joe Retaliation wins on that one. But think of Mummy Maniac. That movie could not have cost more than like $7,000.
It was not better, but not worse.
Somebody in the chat.
It was a lateral move.
Is this the movie Jennifer was in pre-nose job? Yes. This predates any nose job Jennifer Aniston may or may not have had, I think. What year is this movie from? Because I know it's the 90s because they make mention of that. It's like, this is in the 50s. It's the 90s.
1993. The opening scene happens in 83. So, and then it says 10 years later. I will say that Jennifer Aniston's character is essentially, like, if you remember season 1 of Friends and how shallow and kind of bitchy Rachel was in that first season, where she felt she was really entitled and kind of was oblivious as to like, why is life not handing me everything I want? And not in a mean way. That's just what she expected. That's kind of the same character that she plays in Leprechaun, except the Leprechaun version is worse. It's
Wait,
like
so
even more.
I have a question about that, just to lead into another topic. But
Okay.
I was thinking about, not actually thinking about Friends recently, but there's so many people who have really fond memories of Friends, and it seems the longer it goes that I haven't watched it, the more I realized I really hated every single character on Friends. Like, I used to like it, and I used to be like, it was an alright show. But the longer it goes without me actually watching Friends, the more I think I hate everyone who was on that show.
Well, you're also getting older, and as you get older, you're
I
realizing
understand that, and I'm just wondering.
But I'm saying,
will
as
I
you get
hate
older,
Friends more? Or?
you realize what jerks they all were. Also, to be fair, as the show went on, those characters became more and more like caricatures. They became more extreme in whatever. Like if you wanted to boil down their character traits in a couple of words, they just got way more extreme by the end. So Joey became even more stupid and ridiculous. Phoebe became even more flighty and weird. Monica certainly became more obsessive compulsive. Like the little quirks that she had early on, which kind of just made her kind of a funny character, became the defining traits by the end of it, where she was just this crazed obsessive compulsive. Chandler, same sort of thing. He went into snark overdrive by the end. Ross became a fucking neurotic nightmare. Rachel was really the only one who seemed to actually progress as a character. She became less shallow and materialistic, and became a little more worldly.
Towards the end, she just kept bouncing back and forth on the whole Ross thing, from what I remember.
The whole series starts off when Rachel leaves her wedding. So like she starts off wishy-washy, and she ends up wishy-washy. So maybe she didn't have growth.
That's fair. Well, she just didn't seem as shallow to me at the end. She definitely seemed wishy-washy, where she couldn't really make up her mind, but she didn't seem to be as concerned with materialistic things, which is really how she was in those early seasons. But this is also based on my memory. I have not watched an episode of Friends in more than a decade. I also can't stand I think of all the Chandler's probably the only character that I could remotely consider being someone I could get along with these days. And that's only if he would just knock that shit off once in a while. I'm like, no, seriously, dude. Ha. We all know. Yes, you're the funny one.
There's no way I could hang out with Ross or any of those guys. So,
Yeah, and Ross started off. I mean, yeah, he was always neurotic, but at least he was kind of likable early on. Like you could see some stuff in him that was kind of endearing, and he certainly. I mean, you kind of got that whole puppy dog expression thing going on with the Ross character.
That wears off fast, though. Come on.
It does, and especially by the time he gets into his whole "I have rage issues," Ross. That's where he just becomes like he's kind of a psychopath. Yeah. So that's why I kind of prefer Seinfeld, because none of those characters had any redeeming qualities, even at the beginning of the show. So you're like, okay, these are just horrible people, and that's kind of the point.
I absolutely agree about that, because I watched Friends. I made the mistake of watching Friends because I think I was in a hotel room and I had cable. I'm like, oh, it's TBS. I'll watch some episodes of Friends, and I'm like, what? Why this is terrible? Like the humor is not like it's dated. It's just, I guess you have to be of that time for it to actually be any good, because it's this. It almost looks like a parody considering all the other shows that came after it. So even if you're watching the original version, or hardly the original, it's kind of it's the most popular version of this kind of Friends group of like, oh, people who really love each other and they're really good friends. Like that has been done to death. Seinfeld had the idea of there will be no growth here. We will tell you that outright. These people are obnoxious assholes. They are selfish. They are selling each other out in episode 1. And that's what they're doing at the very end. And I know a lot of people didn't like that last episode of Seinfeld, and I don't think it was their best episode. I think the Chinese restaurant episode might be the best one. But it stayed true to form. It's just that Larry David left for a couple of years, so the stories got more fantastic, like the idea of like dropping a junior mint into a patient in an operating theater. That's a little bit out there.
Right.
But I think Seinfeld, if you're going to go back and watch stuff, that stuff is like like, how the hell are they getting this on TV? An entire episode about not masturbating. That's what they had on TV. On NBC,
Master
no
of your
less.
domain.
Or the sponge episode for a while, which I guess would make no sense if it were on now, but
Yeah, it's also a show that has a lot of dated kind of humor in it as well, but I think overall it aged better than Friends has. I remember distinctly when my wife and I went to England. It was we went to a restaurant and we were giggling the whole time because we could hear 3 other tables in our vicinity and they were all talking about Friends. They were absolutely obsessed with the show. And England was about 2 years behind the actual show. So we were like, boy, we could really screw with some people today if we wanted to. Like, oh, yeah, you're wondering about if Ross and Rachel get together? Well, yeah, they do. But they break up. They're on a break.
And they get back together. Then they break up.
Well, I think at that point they hadn't gotten back together again or something. I can't remember specifically where in the chronology of Friends we were at that point, but I do remember thinking like we could totally mess with these people if we wanted to. But so there you go. Jennifer Aniston, Friends, Leprechaun, pile of shit. Moving on.
Pile of shit. I like that.
That was the original working title according to the IMDb trivia. As I am full of movie misinformation. You know they're making a sequel, right? Or a prequel to Leprechaun?
They're rebooting. Not only they're rebooting, but it's not it's WWE that's rebooting it.
Well,
it's
yeah,
a WWE
division.
production.
Wait. This is a serious discussion you two are having right now.
And it's Leprechaun. We're talking about Leprechaun, not Friends. Although a WWE version of Friends would be the most fucking phenomenal television show ever.
It could be.
Like,
yeah.
Rachel just burst in and totally body slammed Ross onto thumbtacks. Wah, wah.
It's like, I'm sick of your shit. I'm sick of your moping. Here's a chair. No, Leprechaun is going to be played by the guy who plays Hornswoggle on WWE TV. Yeah. They have a Leprechaun. They already had a Leprechaun character. I'm not even making that up. That eventually joined a band gimmick. So now they're a 3-man band is now 3.5-man band. And that look at Eric's face of like, what the fuck? Exactly.
No.
That's what's happening.
Hornswoggle, has been a character who stuck around far longer than anyone would imagine based upon when he first appeared in WWE. It was one of those gimmicks where you thought, oh, well, this is a terrible idea. They're going to abandon this after like a month, maybe. Nope.
He came out Irishman, right? That was the whole thing. Like there was an Irishman named Fit Finley. He came out. His whole gimmick was I'm Finley and I like to fight. That's his entire gimmick. Eventually, this little guy dressed as a leprechaun shows up from under the ring, helps him win matches every now and then. And the whole storyline with this character is that he lived under the ring, and you'd go into some kind of portal because this is the actual logic of the show. He would disappear. So everybody go after him.
To be fair, this is the same WWE that has established as canon that Sheamus and Beaker from the Muppets are in the same family.
That's true.
Wait, what?
The Muppets.
I don't know.
So when WWE Raw came to Atlanta the last time, well, maybe not the last time, but couple of years ago, it was at the same time that the Muppets film, the not the most recent one, but the previous one, the reboot, when that Muppets film was coming to theaters. So as a cross promotion, the Muppets appeared on WWE Raw in several little segments, mostly backstage segments, but there were a couple that actually happened during matches. And one of the backstage segments had Beaker, and he was supposed to run out to the ring and give who is it? Who's the guy who has the Cobra?
Santino.
He's supposed to give Santino a tincture, a potion that would allow Santino to defeat his opponent, because his opponent was one of the big heels, one of the bad guys. So Beaker starts to make his way out, but he is then stopped by a different heel. I can't remember which one. And is harassed, and eventually the potion is destroyed in the process. But then Sheamus, the big Irish wrestler, comes to Beaker's rescue. And then after he essentially scares off the bad guy, he turns to Beaker and says, "Oh, I meant to be telling you, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be able to make it to the family reunion this year." And so implying, of course, that Seamus and Beaker both belong to the same family. Thus, we have the canon that Beaker, the Muppet, is related to Sheamus, the former WWE champion. By the way, Eric, I know that you're kind of like sighing and shaking your head. I genuinely love this. Not even in an ironic way. I was that.
No, I know you do, and I know that Ayaz does. I really just have to. This is the soap opera that I have not watched that's been going on for 20 years.
Well, see, what's fun about this is that, and I mean seriously, I really do think this is fun. So professional wrestling has had several different major cycles or eras, if you want to think of it that way. In the 80s, it was extremely cartoony. It was good guys versus bad guys. There was no sort of complex nature to the storylines. You had Hulk Hogan representing all that's good, America, vitamins, saying your prayers. And then you had the bad guys who were very easily identifiable as bad because either they were foreign or or they were just nasty, right? Like you had Iron Sheik, that kind of stuff. So then you flash forward a bit and you get into a more complex storyline, especially in the Attitude Era, where you had people who were behaving like bad guys, but the crowds were cheering them. Now, usually in the old wrestling days, that would be considered a failure. If you were a bad guy or a heel, you were expected to draw heel heat, in that you wanted everyone to boo you. What you wanted to do is create a feeling in the audience that they want to see you lose. They don't necessarily care who beats you. They just want to see you get beaten. So that's normally the role of the heel. But in the Attitude Era, being a bad guy was kind of like being, anti-establishment or sort of a vigilante kind of approach. And that got a lot of support. So people who were doing things like cheating or whatever, but if they're cheating against an authority figure, were cheered. And that became a more complex storyline than just good versus evil. So you had some people who were presenting themselves as being squeaky clean and good, but were being treated like villains. And so that's the role they played. Like Kurt Angle's a great example of that. His whole thing was coming out and being an all-American wrestler, but he kept getting booed. And so he kind of embraced that and became this over-the-top, like, positive guy who continues to talk about how great he is while everyone's booing him. Move ahead a little further, and you get out of that Attitude Era where the WWE at the time was really catering to an older wrestling crowd. They were essentially catering to the same people who had been kids in the 80s, but now had grown up. And they realized, well, we can't really go with the cartoony thing anymore because that doesn't fly with our fans. Our fans have grown up with the product. So we're going to change it. But now we're at a stage where those same people have kids of their own. And their kids are into wrestling. But now, because it's kids getting into wrestling again, they had to dial back on the violence and the over-the-top kind of aggression. You don't see things like hardcore matches anymore where people end up all bloodied and cut open. In fact, that's really discouraged in WWE now. Now we're going a little closer to what it was back in the 80s. So you see more of these cartoonish gimmicks popping up and cartoonish storylines. And it's just this cycle that's continuing. I would imagine that if it holds true, we'll have to see it shift again as the new generation of fans grow older and decide they want to see something more gritty than this cartoonish approach. I actually find all that really interesting, even more so than any individual matches that you would watch, because it's kind of cool to see how this has to evolve over time.
And that honestly is the interesting thing to me. Like you tell me this all of the time, and that's why I kind of get excited to actually learn about this, but I don't want to watch the matches. I want to read the history. I want to understand what it's actually doing, social implications or whatever. So sure. the problem is that my need or my want to understand WWE or how it's evolved or whatever could probably be easily solved sitting down to dinner with you for a couple hours.
Sure. I mean, there are actually some great there's some great documentaries as well that explain everything from the roots of professional wrestling, especially in the old carnival days, leading into the region days to the arena days to the earliest televised matches to WWF, and going forward from there. And those documentaries are actually really fascinating to me. And most of them, they might have, if you added up all the minutes of footage of actual matches in there, you might have 15 minutes of footage total.
Right.
Otherwise, it's all interviews, or it's, you might see some footage, but you're hearing narration over that's explaining the evolution of the art form, if you want to call it, or entertainment, however you want to designate it. And I find that fascinating too. I mean, I love the fact that it has its roots in the carnival days, because it means that you have all this weird vocabulary that's peculiar to professional wrestling. And it all had its birth in the days of kayfabe, when you had to present. Yeah. You never acknowledged that it was fake. You never acknowledged that there was any kind of choreographed or predetermined nature to it. You wouldn't even allow your faces and your heels to travel together, because you wanted to maintain that illusion. And back in those days, they had words that explained everything. And the idea was that if you were not inside the circle, you wouldn't understand a conversation between two people, because the words would have no meaning to you, which is kind of cool. Speaking in code, it's neat.
But the problem is, if you watch any of the modern day stuff, it's a 3-hour show on Monday, and maybe there's a good solid 23 minutes in there. I mean, like, you could show these 20 minutes to anybody and like, oh, I see why you get it. But there's all this other shit surrounding it that it's hard to, it's kind of like, when you see a funny YouTube video and you think it's hilarious and you're like, hey, come here, look at this. And then no one's laughing with you. That's what it feels like sometimes to show pro wrestling to people who don't get it. But it's sometimes it's moments.
I think what you need to do is you need to watch the Wyatt family's entrance during the most recent WrestleMania, which I think might be my favorite entrance of all time now, because they had the live band playing the song "Broken Out in Love." At least that was what the original title of that song is. WWE actually purchased the rights and retitled the song. I can't remember what the new title is, but
looking it up.
Thanks, guys. Something that's helpful.
Live fear. Excuse me. It was an S for some reason.
Gotcha.
Live in fear.
Live in fear, right? But anyway, they had a live band playing it, and the live band, like the backing band, all had masks that were kind of reminiscent of plague doctors' masks, the ones that had the really long, like beakish nose, and the lead, and they had goggles on as well, and the lead singer had his face made up to look like a Day of the Dead kind of skull. And the characters of the Wyatt family are portrayed as like a cult, like a backwoods, deep South cult. And as someone who grew up in the rural South, it actually rings true in many ways. I mean, it's obviously a cartoonish kind of approach to it, but not so cartoonish as to be ridiculous. It actually has some. It feels a little close to home in some cases. So I really thought that was a very theatrical, obviously, but effective entrance. So that's the kind of stuff I would show people. And if they're like, this is just stupid, I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I know there's nothing else I'm going to show you that you're going to really get into, like, because this is the theatricality that I really enjoy. I don't enjoy so much the theatricality that's just, catering to the lowest common denominator. That kind of stuff I roll my eyes at. But speaking of entertainment, so E3 is going on right now, right? The Electronic Entertainment Expo. And did you guys watch any of the press events or follow along behind any of that stuff?
I got to see the Microsoft press conference and the Sony one. I paid attention to the EA one slightly, but I have not seen Nintendo's.
Did you see Ubisoft?
I didn't see Ubisoft's, actually.
All right. I only got to watch Microsoft because I had to record that day, so I couldn't continue watching. I was a little underwhelmed by Microsoft. The way I explained it was, from my perspective, it was they announced the kind of games that I would probably be interested in buying if I had an Xbox One, but not the kind of games that convinced me to buy an Xbox One. So there was nothing that was shown that made me go like,
I'm really excited about the Halo package, the Halo everything, but I'm not going to buy an Xbox One for that. But
Right.
you're setting
I've
yourself up
played
here,
all those
Jonathan.
games.
Why would you buy a PS4 over an Xbox
Okay.
One?
So for the most part, the same is true of the PS4, except that the Sony press release revealed, and I didn't know this until today because I didn't watch the event when it happened. They revealed that they're bringing back, they're remastering Grim Fandango, a game that was made 15 years ago, an adventure game made by Tim Schafer. One of my favorite computer games of all time, just because the world that was realized was very rich and entertaining. The characters were interesting. It really had this fun kind of film noir approach, and all the designs were based upon Day of the Dead style designs. And it just was such a different feel than the kind of games that were standard. And especially when you look at games today and you realize that unless you're buying an independent title, chances are you're buying another iteration of an existing franchise or something that's essentially a knockoff of an existing franchise. So it's nice to see support going toward this old game, and I hope that would encourage companies, assuming that the game is a success in the marketplace, to maybe go back and look at creating more adventure games, or maybe even remastering other great adventure game titles, like some of the older Monkey Island games.
If Sony wanted to buy all of the old LucasArts games and just re-release them, they would sell the PS4 50 times over.
Right. Like I'm tempted to get a PS4 just for Grim Fandango, and that's a game I've already played. I played that on PC. I have great memories of that game. But yeah, all the newer titles. There were a couple of newer titles that I thought were really interesting looking as well, but nothing that on its own would have convinced me to go and buy a PS4. But yeah, I agree, Eric. If they got the rights to all those LucasArts games, especially something like TIE Fighter, I would love for TIE Fighter to come back out
versus
again.
X-Wing, I would buy it in a heartbeat. Remastered.
It was such a fun game.
That's $400 I would never get back.
Yeah.
See, what's driving me nuts about the games is if you're not paying attention to, if you're not paying close attention to each of these press conferences, a number of these games have the same concept. I mean, I know a video game has a certain kind of dynamic, but it's like, here's your protagonist, here's your first-person shooter, you're going to have this open world thing. And I know that's really hot, but after a while, it just kind of feels like all the same games. That I started paying attention to these other games. One was called, I think it's called Intertwined. Do you remember that game, Jonathan? No, it was a Sony one, so you didn't see that one.
It was Entwined.
Oh, I saw the trailer for that. Yeah.
It was a really cool. It's a $10 mini game, effectively a $10 game that you would download, and it just uses the controller in another way. It's two souls that are in love, and it's not. This sounds really weird already. And so the idea is you got to use the analog sticks on the controller to try to get them to line up to certain targets on the screen. I'm like, well, that's a totally different style of gameplay. And that was something that back when things like Guitar Hero and Rock Band and these other kinds of things, that the Kinect-based stuff, the PlayStation Eye, all of these things that were taking video games into a different realm. That's the stuff that got me more excited because, yeah, like you guys, I want to play some of the old games over again. I really thought it was neat that they're getting remastered and getting to see them in 1080p. But that definitely pushes all the technological barriers. But what I want to see is new forms of entertainment coming out of this, because right now it reminds me of just the movie industry. It's like, here are the massively major games, and this is the sequel, the 15th sequel, and then there's this indie game that might be really cool, but we're not going to get right behind it.
Well, I mean, you've got to look to the indie games for that kind of experience. I mean, it reminds me of the really early days of the arcade experience, where arcade games were bizarre as shit. I mean, even the popular ones were pretty weird when you look at them. I mean, today they're classics, so we don't think much of it. But you look at something like, Q*bert. It's a weird ass game to explain to somebody. So it's kind of interesting to see these independent gamers or independent game companies come up with concepts that sort of embrace that sort of creative approach, and it's not, here's another platformer, or here's another first-person shooters, or here's another sandbox game. I like seeing that. And I hope that we see more of it. I mean, and I think Sony, they really established themselves last year. Like they came out and said, we're going to support independent game developers. That was one of their big announcements, like something that really differentiated them from Microsoft last year. And it still seems like it's true this year. They didn't necessarily go overboard on the whole independent games thing, but they do still seem to give it more attention than Microsoft does. So even if Microsoft is supporting independent game developers to a decent degree, that's not the message you get when you watch that press event, because there's very little attention that's dedicated to that. So it could be that it's not a fair representation, but it's one of the things that makes me lean towards the PS4, because you get a chance of playing some games that are very different from all the stuff that we've become used to. And that's not to say that the stuff that other companies are making, the big name companies, these big first person shooters and other style games that we were used to, it's not to say that those are bad games. They could be excellent games. They could have amazing effects and great voice acting, good gameplay features, but it's still stuff we've seen a billion times before. It's kind of the same way I feel about action movies these days. I've seen so many action movies that I don't really have an interest in seeing anymore, even if it has different actors and a different plot, because when you strip away a lot of those layers, they're all the same thing.
And that's the weird thing, because I think these open world platformers seem lame, and I'm like, oh, that's Batman. I definitely want to be Batman. So if they get me back with the old IP that I like, I'm like, oh, I'll definitely pay attention to that. I make fun of so many movies because of like these. Oh, we have this protagonist, and all the odds would be against them, and of course they'll overcome, and that's how every freaking movie is. But I want to see Spider-Man, but I don't want to see Harry Potter. It's the same stupid story, in the grand, obviously. But,
I'll never forget when Peter Parker was locked in the cupboard.
Yeah, that was a constant problem. Uncle Ben's rice.
Waiting for that owl to deliver a message saying you've been selected to become an altered human.
Owls, spiders, same fucking thing, right? You got an animal showing up, and you like some kind of a magical assignment, bigger purpose. Fuck it, I don't know. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
seems legit.
I was just thinking, like, when you were talking about bizarre video games, I'm like, yeah, I was thinking, like, I think I watched a documentary on this. Then I realized the reason why I remember anything about bizarre video games is because I was listening to your show, Strickland, listening to How Stuff Works, listening to tech stuff, and I've been listening to the history of handheld gaming consoles. And these are I think it's a two-parter, and it was really good. Yeah. And I was as you're talking and I'm listening, I'm looking up this stuff. So I guess to me, I'm actually putting the visuals together. I'm thinking of those micro consoles. So if you got a thing on, I think you got a thing on consoles, I'll look that up and watch that. So I didn't watch a documentary. I was listening to you. So congratulations, you taught me something.
See, it's good. We were so descriptive that you thought you remembered watching a documentary as opposed to listening to an audio podcast.
Listen, Jonathan, don't let it go to your head. You taught one guy one thing one time.
No, the audio was going while I was looking up pictures of things because you're trying to describe.
I'd like to point out I've taught Ayaz many things. It's just that every time I teach him a new thing, it pushes out whatever old thing I had taught him before.
As in, like, I don't have the memory of it actually happening, but I know the thing that happens. So I don't know. It's a documentary or something. No, it's a podcast with research, you dumbass. What is the damn console? It was this micro console that was a bare, like, it was basically a bare circuit, and you would put these things on top to make it a different game. Do you remember this was Microvision or something? Is that right?
I could pull up my notes and take a look. But yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. I remember what you were talking about. There were a lot of really weird approaches to this, including ones where you essentially had everything hard coded into the console itself on the really early ones where, that was it. Whatever games were on that device, that's what you were stuck with. And then there were later ones where you could switch out the games, but you were still very much limited. And I think that's one of the ones you're talking about. But I would actually have to pull up, and I don't even that goes back quite a ways. But I'd have to pull a history of handheld gaming. Hey, look, there's my notes.
That's also why 27th. I didn't the show or not, because if I'm either listening to Strickland on my podcast on the bus ride, or if I'm listening to him on this show, it's the same amount of time. So
Yeah, I'm looking right now. You guys go ahead. I'll see if I can find what the one is
Got
that you're
an extra
specifically thinking of.
space there. I have to move that. If you're listening to the audio only version of this podcast, did you know there's a video version of this podcast? If you're listening to the and watching the video version, you know there's an audio version. But to do a small plug, go to gfqnetwork.com. We've got actual episodes, subscription things, and you should really subscribe because we basically do the show whenever the fuck we feel like, and thankfully they let us do that right now, and that'll probably change once I finally move on the 21st. I got my tickets. Or I got the tickets. Getting the hell out of here. Gonna leave California.
Yeah.
How many injuries have you sustained so far?
One monstrous injury so far to the nose. If you don't follow me on Facebook, now you got a reason to. Unless you got, I think I only share that with friends.
If you too would like to see Ayaz document various injuries, follow him on Facebook.
Well, I actually did hurt my face of all the things. So what happened is I have these shelves.
It was a shelf, right? So Facebook, it totally fits there.
Okay, so here's the deal. This is actually a karmic experience, and I believe this to be karma finally catching up to me. A long time ago, maybe like 8 years ago, I bought a pair of shelves, collapsing shelves from Staples. You just open up the sides, the shelves fall down, it turns into a bookshelf. They only charged me for one of them. So I said, sure, I'll take it. Someone was trying to convince me to take it back. You know, it's not a good thing to take two of them. Like, screw it. You know, I probably paid Staples hundreds of times over on things they've screwed me on. Screw it. I'll take it with me. So finally, when I'm ready to move these objects, took off all the books. I'm putting up the shelves, putting up the one on the bottom. I'm on my knee. One of the shelves, boom, right on the bridge of my nose. Comes down, crashing on it, leaving a nice big bruise. For the most part, it looked like a zit when I came into work the next day. But it hurt like a bitch, man. And I'm like, well, okay, you know, I deserve that. I should have paid the $20 for this shitty little shelf. And it survived several, a lot of moves. It's done a lot of things. And so I promptly destroyed it and put it in the trash because that fucker is not making the move. So long, shelves. True story.
By the way, we don't treat our listeners the same way we treat our furniture. We just want you guys to know that. We would never break you and then throw you in the garbage.
We'll put you next to the garbage because the shelves didn't really fit in the garbage.
I do expect that our popularity must have soared since we went quiet for almost a full month. Or maybe even more than a full month.
I mean, I don't think we have those metrics, man.
Yeah. Numbers don't go that high.
Feedburn is just spinning back irrational numbers. There's no freaking. It's just Feedburn doesn't actually properly work for the past 2.5 years. So,
I have often thought that the number of listeners that this show has is in fact imaginary. So that makes sense.
It's all in our heads. It's like Buffy in that episode where she's in an insane asylum, which I still like to believe is the entire show. By the way, I believe that in the entire series of Buffy, consider she dies like 3 times and comes back twice.
That would definitely make season 5 more bearable. I think it was season 5 was the one where she came back from the dead and spent practically the entire season moping about not being dead.
No, I thought she dies. She's died how many times? I know she dies in one episode.
Well, she dies in the first season.
Yeah.
She dies in the first season because that's what creates. I can't remember the first alternate Slayer, but then that Slayer dies, and then Faith is called up. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, she dies in the first season temporarily and is then resuscitated. But I thought she died at the end of season 4. Like that was where she did the sacrifice of herself. And season 5 was when the show changed networks. And so she was called back from the dead by a spell. And she spent the entire season moping and then screwing Spike. And then singing about it.
That she dies. Yeah. It's season 6 that she comes back.
Oh, okay. That's fair. That makes more sense actually, considering that when she comes back, it's not that long before the end of the series as a whole, because it went 7 seasons. So yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah. So she died between
season 5. Season 5 would be the season where they introduced the character Dawn, and they pissed everybody off because Dawn shows up and is Buffy's sister, and it turns out that it's Dawn is actually a personified key. She's literally a key that opens up a gate, and but she's been put into the form of a human girl and given a backstory of being Buffy's younger sister, and reality itself has been altered so that she has always, in the minds of everyone there, she's always existed as Buffy's younger sister, including to Buffy herself. So with no explanation when she first shows up, she is treated as her younger sister and everyone accepts it. And it drove viewers nuts because they weren't yet aware that this had been some sort of reality altering thing. To them, it felt like a character had just been introduced and that somehow this character had been part of the show all along, even though this is the first time this character has actually shown up on the show. It's like if you had started a new episode of Charles in Charge, but you have an entirely new kid in the family, but everyone acts like that kid has been there the whole time. And it wasn't until later that you get the explanation of Dawn's origins and why reality has become this way. So it was just one of those things where everything in the show seemed to change, and there were a lot of viewers, a lot of fans who were turned off by it. Just like, that's not cool to sit there and introduce a new character and pretend like this has been here all along. That's kind of lame. But it was purposefully done that way.
I think I wasn't paying full attention to Buffy at that point, and when she shows up, when Dawn finally shows up, I'm like, did I totally miss this for the past couple of seasons? Maybe I wasn't paying enough attention. So I watched them again. I'm like, wait a second, no, something's not right here. I wasn't this completely blissfully ignorant while this was happening. I was just unaware or that oblivious. It couldn't have been that oblivious. I mean, I don't pay attention to a lot of shit, but when I'm watching TV, there's a good chance I'll notice the major characters, like the sister of Buffy. But anyway,
I didn't like that character, not because she was an artificial character that then got essentially retconned into the show, but within the logic of the universe itself. I was irritated at that character because she was a fucking annoying character.
Yes, she was a teenage girl.
Yeah, her purpose was to make bad decisions that would have terrible consequences for everybody else.
She was basically Kim Bauer from 24 or Robin from the Batman and Robin books from the very early days when he's basically the kid hostage.
I was waiting for her to get eaten by a mountain lion. So in that sense, she was very much like Bauer.
Eric, have you seen any of these shows? Do you know what the hell we're talking about with the mountain lion?
Buffy? I got Buffy. But see, my problem with Buffy is I stopped talking about Buffy when I went to a Buffy the Vampire Slayer quiz night, 8 rounds of just Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I thought I knew it until I went to that, and then I just gave up talking about it ever because I know nothing.
I know what you're talking about. I mean, I considered myself to be a fan of the show. I would even go to there was a fan website called The Bronze, which was like a message board. And I like to go there to kind of discuss like fan theories and stuff. But I would show up and people would be citing episodes by title, and they'd be having these discussions where if you didn't know it backwards and forwards, it was impossible to keep up with the conversation. And I would be looking at this, the way I would talk about it is like, I like that episode. The one where Giles does that thing, like, and they're saying, okay, so in episode blah blah blah, in just after the act 2, I'm like, what? Yeah. Now I did go to a couple of the parties that group threw, and those parties were amazing. they were phenomenal.
I'm sure they were.
They were. I mean, they threw the parties in Los Angeles, and the cast and crew of the show showed up. It was great. Okay. It was almost
that's a pretty good story.
It's pretty cool. It was almost like going to a convention, except in this case, the cast and crew weren't obligated to show up at all. They were invited by the community, and the parties were happening in Los Angeles, so it meant that the people who worked on the show didn't have to go very far to attend if they wanted to. Mm. And I remember going, and that's how I got to take pictures with folks like Allison Hannigan. Robia Lamort, who played Ginny Calendar. She was also one of Prince's dancers for a while. Michelle Trachtenberg, who played Dawn. I met her. She's a very nice person. I did yell at her. James Marsters, who played Spike, met him. Joss Whedon, met him. There were people like
the Avengers movie. That's what he did.
What's that?
I'm pretty sure you've given yourself credit for the Avengers movie. You're like, well, if you ever get these guys together.
Well, I told him, I said, I really hope that we get to see some more comic book movies because I would love to see what you would do with a comic book hero super team. I mean, you've essentially done that with Buffy, but just imagine what you could do with, I don't know, like, Iron Man and Captain America. And he said, that'd be nice. No, I'm totally making all that up.
I said, the hell with that. I'm going to do the Fantastic Four. And that's how Fantastic Four was done.
I didn't really talk with him at all because one, I was intimidated. And two, it was clear, like, there were tons of people, tons of fans at this party. And I was sure that he was going to be swamped the entire time. So I didn't bug him. I was just a dude there. This was before I had any kind of internet presence at all, apart from being a guy who would like to go to Buffy the Vampire Slayer message boards.
You are more than just a dude at this point? You think of yourself as more than just a dude?
I'm treated like I'm more than just a dude. I don't think I'm more than just a dude. But people sometimes treat me like I'm more. Not that I don't think that's necessary, by the way. It just happens. Not frequently either, but it does happen.
This is freaking great.
Well, like if I go to an event like South by Southwest, occasionally I have people come up and ask me for an autograph, which is a weird thing to have happen.
That is a weird thing to have happen, especially for you, I can imagine.
Yes. Yeah,
because I'm imagining asking you for an autograph and how ridiculous that would feel from my end.
Well, yeah, but it's a little different because we're on the podcast together. Yeah. No, but I mean, I've had people ask me for autographs, which is, it's a very flattering thing, and I'm happy to do it. It's just very weird. It's not. And back when I was a participating fan of things like that message board, I didn't have any sort of internet presence. So it wasn't like if I went to one of these parties, I was a fan at the party. I wasn't part of the VIP group at all. So I wasn't going in the green room or anything like that. These days when I get invited to conventions, I go to the green room to relax and chat with folks that I otherwise wouldn't get a chance to chat with. So it's a little different. But those were great days.
Show, remember, and if you're watching this show and you know what Jonathan Strickland looks like and you see that he's available, ask him for an autograph anywhere on your person. He will give it to you. He's always carrying a Sharpie, keeps it behind his ear. If you can't find it, always check in his back pocket.
Yeah. Just root around in there. You'll find it. Also, just keep in mind, if you really, really want the full experience, wait until I've autographed something for you. Then maintain eye contact as you purposefully destroy whatever it was I signed. And then just say, you deserve this. You deserve this.
I believe there's an Instagram account about people doing this already. So
tears just streaming from my eyes.
It's called Tears of Strickland. So it's Instagram.com/Tears of Strickland, where you can watch him cry as you destroy his autographed copies of things.
It's a good thing I'm not going to Nerdtacular this year because I could actually see people doing that to me. And
I would publish it everywhere if I knew you were going somewhere.
It would genuinely hurt my feelings.
On that note, let's look into the future. Next week on Podcast Without Pretense.
You have genuinely hurt my feelings.
I genuinely don't care.
I thought like one or two might, but 400 is ridiculous.